I blamed him for objectifying me. Now he hasn't touched me in 3 months and says it's all my fault. Hello, Reddits. My name is Kitty, and I'm 28. I've been married for a year and a half now, but I honestly don't know if my marriage is going to last anymore. I'm so frustrated, and I keep trying to put things back to the way they once were, but the more I try, the more everything keeps getting worse. My husband Mark hasn't touched me in months now. I've tried everything, even walking naked in front of him. I've tried to set that romantic setting that would normally put him in the mood, but nothing is working. Mark just wouldn't touch me. The height of it had been when he came home drunk the other night, and Mark never drank, but he had obviously hung out with his friends after literally avoiding their meetings after we got married. He had always told me he wanted to spend time with his wife, not his friends, so he avoided meeting them as much as possible so he could spend time with me. But that night, Mark had gone out and he came home tipsy, but even in that state when I tried to get him to touch me. Mark had pushed me off him like I was some disgusting pest and told me that it's all my fault before he staggered to the guest room he's been sleeping in and locked the door on the inside just as he has been doing for 3 months now. It really is all my fault. I said something I shouldn't have said and I regret it, but I didn't think it was offensive at the time. I was just angry that he was addressing me like that and blaming me for everything when I thought he had faults too. I blamed him for objectifying me, and the consequences are him not touching me or not even talking to me for the past 3 months, even though we live together. I don't know what to do, to be honest, and I didn't even mean what I said. I only said it out of anger when he wouldn't stop making everything my fault, when I didn't think it was. Well, I know now it's my fault, and I'm guilty of everything he had accused me of, but Mark is not even letting me close enough to apologize and try to get him to forgive me. He's not letting me in anymore, and it hurts so badly because things are now this way. With me guessing, not knowing where everything's going or what his next line of action would be. Things weren't always that way between Mark and I. Like I wrote earlier, Mark definitely loved me. He loved me so much that he stopped going out with his friends as often as he did before when he met me. We met through a friend of his, though. He brought me as his date, but it was clear that Mark and I matched even better because of how well we vibed and how he made me laugh. And by the end of that night, the friend jokingly handed me over to Mark to take me instead. Maybe it was because of the way I kept glancing at him instead of focusing on the guy I was on a date with. Or perhaps it was the way I kept giggling at every word Mark said. It was probably because of the way Mark paid so much attention to me. His friends had to repeat their words before he was able to give an answer. Either way, we collected each other's contact, and that was how everything started. We were friends for a week before we started dating, and we dated for a whole year before we got married. Mark was just the perfect guy for me. He was kind, patient, loving, and trusting. He was so romantic, and I was always looking forward to each day spent with him, which was almost all the time when he wasn't at work. Mark worked for a construction company as an engineer, so he was always busy and would usually spend his spare time hanging out with his friends and later me. And no, regardless of how busy Mark was or tired and stressed he was from the day's work, there was always time for me, and I loved that. Mark proposed to me on our 1-year anniversary, and I easily said yes. I mean, who wouldn't want to marry the love of their life? We got married within a month, and it was just a small ceremony with our parents and friends as witnesses. Mark didn't want anything too much, especially because of his savings to buy us a house so that we could have more space when we started welcoming our kids, which were going to come a year after marriage, as we had both agreed initially. I wanted all the time I could get with Mark before our kids came, and he wanted the same. I thought life would be rosy as a married woman with a husband like Mark. I thought it would always be as sweet as the relationship when everything was perfectly normal, but it wasn't. Within 6 months of marriage, I was starting to get really frustrated. Mark insisted that I didn't work because he apparently wanted me to be a housewife, which I agreed to initially because I actually did like the concept of having someone else do the providing while you just sit at home and enjoy yourself. But it wasn't as easy as it sounds. I have always been an outgoing person, and I thought work limited my social life because I only got to hang out with my friends on weekends, which was usually never enough to hear every gist we had for one another. So when I quit my job, all I wanted to do was hang out with my friends, go to places I only got to write on my bucket list that I would go to one day and drink my worries away without bothering about work the next day. But having friends who have to go to work and wait until the same weekend again didn't make it as fun as I imagined it to be. I was bored at home, waiting each day for Mark to come back home. He always did come home each day bearing gifts. It was either my favorite snack or food or maybe flowers, and it made it easy to look forward to his arrival. But eventually, even that got boring, particularly when Mark started having some projects which made him leave town for weeks and sometimes a month on end so he could work on them. I couldn't cope with everything, and it was starting to really frustrate me, especially after a whole year of being married. Not seeing Mark all the time like I did when we were dating just made me sad and unhappy. It didn't help matter that I felt like Mark married me only for sex. I mean, at the beginning, it didn't look or even feel like that. But after a whole year of being married to him, I was starting to feel that way. It was almost like Mark never considered my feelings whenever he had to go on those trips. He just would suddenly announce that he had to leave. A day or sometimes the night before the morning, he had to go. It was so frustrating, and it felt like all he kept me at home for was being his wife. Whenever Mark was around, we spent most of our time in bed trying to make up for the lost times. Of course, he still brought home gifts, but we never went out anymore like we did while dating in the first few months of marriage. We would have sex, and then Mark is leaving the next minute for some work emergency. I started to really feel like that was all I meant to him. Even though he called every time and told me he loved me before ending the call, I felt they were just words, and he didn't really mean them. I was only just a legalized means of relieving sexual tension to him, and it made me grow really sad, and then angry. We were supposed to start having kids after 1 year of being together, but Mark was barely around for that. And for some weird reasons, he still kept insisting that I continued using the birth control pills even after the year we agreed on. I never tried to find out the reasons, though. He said it, and I agreed with him. I didn't want us fighting when he spent little time at home already, so every time he came home, I smiled and kissed him, and allowed him to do what he wanted with my body. I behaved completely like the perfect wife with no complaints at all. Maybe I should have said something. Maybe I should have voiced out my feelings instead of keeping it all in. I know I should have, because eventually I had done something really awful and unforgivable. Something I knew Mark hated so much and would never forgive because he had always told me from the start how much he abhorred it. But I went and did it anyway. I cheated. I cheated on Mark with Joe, my gym instructor. And at that moment, I really thought I was just trying to make myself happy, so I ignored and kept pushing down my guilt, and I focused totally on the feeling of euphoria that usually wrapped me whenever I was with Joe. Joe was good at what he did. I mean, with bodybuilding at all. And well at sex, too. He did know way too much about a woman's body and would turn her on instantly without even trying much. I was gaining too much weight from just sitting around in the house doing nothing but sleep, watching movies, eating, and the occasional outings that I went out to. I didn't want Mark to find any reason to stop coming home. I felt he was at least coming home to have sex, and I didn't want him to get put off if he couldn't easily lift me like he did before, or turn my position as easily as he could do before. He already couldn't lift me for too long, especially the last time he came home before I went to the gym, so I decided to register at the gym with a personal trainer. My personal trainer is Joe, and the first thing I thought of when I saw him and all that muscle he had built was sex, and I felt really embarrassed for thinking so, even though I didn't do it out loud. Somehow, after days of being watched exercise under Joe's gentle gaze and voice, I was starting to wish that Mark paid me as much attention as Joe did. He didn't need to do much to make me aware of him. He just had to stand there or hold me to correct the way I held, or was handling an instrument for me to feel too much already. I liked the way he would bend over me and talk softly into my ears when he needed me to do something, or the way he stared at me longer than necessary. Well, actually, my breasts when my only gym wear was dirty, and I had to wear a top and shorts to exercise with. The top kept pulling down whenever I moved too much, and I noticed eventually that Joe followed all the movement with his eyes. That had motivated me to start wearing more tops with even more ridiculous ups that definitely showed everything while I worked out. Exercising with Joe became some kind of torment, and at the same time a turn-on, and I always couldn't wait to go to the gym to exercise. The only times I couldn't go were days when Mark was around, and I knew he would suspect if I spent longer than an hour or two at the gym. But when he wasn't around, I spent longer than 4 hours just hanging around so I could get the chance to see Joe work. I found out later that he owned the gym, but mostly worked as a trainer because he liked it. One day I purposely went in the evening to train knowing that Joe would mostly close up at that time. I wanted him to be forced to let me in and alone with him there. I didn't know what I was expecting, being there with him. I just knew that I desperately wanted to do that, and I had done it. Joe did as I hoped, and he let me in and stopped packing up to leave. This time, he didn't talk me through the exercise. I already clearly knew what I was doing. He just watched me do my thing, and I was purposely thrusting my chest out in his direction. Joe didn't stop watching me, but he didn't come to either, and after a straight 30 minutes of continuing the exercise without much of a response from Joe, I gave up and told him I was done exercising. And instead of picking my things and going home as I should have after the short exercise, I had a ridiculous idea, and before I could think it through whether or not it was bad or good, I enacted it. I walked up to Joe and kissed him. He didn't react at first, just stood there and watched me kiss him. But then, when he eventually did, I thought of nothing until I was completely naked and out of my sweaty clothes and on the floor in the gym with Joe on top of me, kissing every inch of my body, not minding the sweats. I wasn't thinking of Mark at that point. All that mattered to me were the feelings I was getting from having Joe touch me the way he was doing. And it didn't stop until after I've had unprotected sex on the cold floor right in the gym. The feeling didn't stop after Joe disentangled himself from me and stood up to wear his clothes, and I also stood up to wear mine. Nobody said a word to each other. We just simply dressed up, and I left to my house while Joe proceeded to lock up the gym. The feeling of guilt did come later that night when my phone rang from a call from Mark, and I couldn't bring myself to pick it up. But I couldn't stop thinking about how much pleasure I got from just sleeping with Joe. Mark came home the next day and proceeded to spend an entire week at home, and instead of me feeling happy and excited about it, I was frustrated. It meant I couldn't see Joe, and it meant I couldn't get a repeat of what I kept thinking about. Mark couldn't top the sex I had with Joe, not that they did anything really differently. Perhaps it was just the thrill from doing something you shouldn't be caught doing. It was more fun doing what you weren't supposed to do than what you were supposed to do, right? I tried encouraging Mark to go out with his friends, but he spent all his time at home, and when he wasn't on business calls or doing something on his laptop, we were in bed having sex and nothing else. It made me feel really objectified. And even though Joe and I literally were in the same kind of relationship, it felt different. At least he did talk to me. He observed me when I wasn't handling equipment well, and he helped me build back my body. And there was that sexual tension between us that seemed like silent communication. When Mark finally left for work after the week, I was free again to go to the gym, and I did. I went in the morning as I usually did, and instead of the excitement I wanted to see on Joe's face, his face said and showed nothing. He helped me train as usual, but he said nothing to me. And this continued for 2 more days, until I confronted him at his closing hour on the 4th day, and we ended up having a repeat of the first time between us. It became our usual routine. I came to the gym in the mornings to exercise, and then at the end of the day to have sex with him. We didn't have any other conversations or commitment talks. In fact, Joe only found out after a week of being together, as we had been, that I was married. I forgot to remove my rings when I came back that evening for our usual routine. I had gone to visit my mother-in-law earlier in the day, and I knew that she would nag me and tell Mark about my ring finger being empty, so I put it on and went to her place. She didn't release me easily, and I didn't have an excuse to leave early either. She knew Mark wasn't in town, and there was nowhere else I had to go. So when she finally did, it was close to Joe's closing hour, so I rushed down there, forgetting my ring on my finger. When Joe saw it, he asked me if I was really married and I had to come clean, even though I was scared that it would end our relationship. But Joe had surprisingly said nothing and just helped me with my clothes and proceeded to have sex with me. He had no problem with me being married. He was even more cool with the fact that I probably wouldn't expect anything more from him, especially with my status, and that made our arrangement even more perfect. Joe and I kept having sex for over a month consistently, and I was getting really addicted to the sex with him. Although I couldn't stop sleeping with Mark to avoid suspicion, especially when he expected that I would anticipate sex with him, I started to hate his touch, and even while underneath Mark, all I thought of to get an orgasm was the way Joe touched me. I don't know how Mark grew suspicious or why he followed me that day. I thought I was perfectly hiding everything, and that there was no way Mark could suspect my indiscretions. Despite the fact that I enjoyed sex with Joe way too much than I should, I love Mark, and I didn't want to lose any of the relationships. Call me greedy or question my thought process, but that was just how I felt, and I just went along with it. Sleeping with Joe at the gym during evenings eventually wasn't enough. I wanted more time with the whole sex thing, and I was starting to get too many back pains from having to have sex nearly every evening on the cold, hard floor. So I started to invite back to my house. Although Joe refused at first, wanting to avoid being busted by my husband, but I managed to convince him, and he eventually agreed to come over in the afternoons, while the trainer he employed was around. So from then on, we started having sex at my place instead. And everywhere in the house, except the bedrooms, were tainted from our sinful acts. Joe knew how to turn anything into a sexual tool, and especially my kitchen utensils, and even the throw pillows on the couch in the living room. I thought of it as fun, and kept inviting him every time or going to the gym to meet him, because we didn't stop meeting at the gym completely. But that had all ended on that day, that horrible day that I keep wishing I could turn things around. Mark had come home as usual, and this time I kept refusing sex with him. I didn't exactly refuse it every time he tried, but I just did times when I craved a certain person's touch and not his, strongly. I even sneaked out on one of the days while Mark was around to meet Joe, but at a hotel this time and not the gym. I wanted a different location, and luckily Joe agreed to it. Perhaps it was the perfume Mark smelled on me, but when he asked, I told him that I was trying out my friend's perfume while at her place. Mark said nothing, and I felt relieved, thinking he believed me. But apparently, Mark had called the friend I told him I was going to visit, and had stylishly asked about me, and she had told him the last time she saw me, even when I always told lies to Mark about visiting her frequently. Mark told me nothing about the call, and the friend didn't bother to call me either to inform me of that, and Mark had planned the perfect way to catch me. He suddenly announced that he was going for another work trip. It wasn't unusual for him to go work trips, or for him to announce hours before he did travel or minutes before, but what was unusual was the fact that he wanted to leave that evening. But I didn't ask for any explanations. I never did before, and I didn't want to, so I helped him pack his bags, and even went with him to his car and kissed his cheeks before he got into the car. After I said goodbye to him as he drove away, I couldn't even wait any longer, too excited to see Joe and make him fulfill all the promises of sexual pleasure that he made over our late-night conversations while Mark slept. And so I ran in to change my clothes and made my way to the gym that evening. Joe was waiting for me when I arrived, and we went straight to business. I was still in the process of helping Joe with his trousers while he was helping me with mine, when Mark walked in and met us like that. I didn't even see him immediately. My back was turned to him, and I was still fumbling with Joe's zippers when Joe suddenly froze, making me frown. I didn't understand why he froze until I saw him staring directly above my head at something, or rather someone. So I turned to see what had captivated his attention that much, and was so shocked to see Mark standing there, looking at both of us speechlessly. I must have screamed because I remember hearing a shocked scream, but I cannot remember whether it was me who screamed or Joe. But it was definitely me, because it was a feminine scream, and Joe definitely didn't scream like that. Mark just merely looked at me from where I was kneeling on the floor, in my attempt to pull off Joe's trousers, and then he just turned around and left. Joe must have guessed who it was from the look on my face, and he said nothing to me, but had asked me to leave. I couldn't believe that Mark had followed me and had seen me in that position with another guy. I didn't know what to do or how to apologize. I was so scared to go home because I didn't know what to expect, so I kept stalling until it was getting darker and I had to go home. I saw his car packed awkwardly in the garage, and I knew he was home. I was secretly hoping he was sleeping when I slipped in, but luck was definitely not on my side because Mark was right there, sitting on that couch that seemed to be Joe's favorite location in the house to have sex. He sat there and he stared at me as I came in. I knew I had to explain. I knew I had to say something, but nothing was coming to my head. I knew I had to apologize, and I tried to come up with words, but nothing was forthcoming, and Mark, seeing me struggling with words, started for me. He started saying really awful things. He called me a whore and a greedy little witch. He told me that I did nothing but sit at home and spend money while he worked, and he did everything to give me a good life, but all I did was frolic around with another man. He called me a liar and a pretender. I knew I deserved everything that he was saying, but his words just kept hurting me more and more. The more he said, the more painful it was, and instead of apologizing like I intended to at first, I got angry and told him it was all his fault for leaving me for months with nothing to do and no one to talk to. I told him that all he did whenever he came back from his trips was only to have sex with me and never any real conversations. I blamed him for objectifying me and making me seek another man's touch to make me feel less objectified. While I continued to rant, Mark just looked at me in shock and then unconcealed anger, and he walked away and went into the guest room to lock himself in there without another word to me. I realized how stupidly I acted, and I tried knocking the door and apologizing, but Mark didn't open the door until the next morning. He ignored me that morning and went out to work and came back in the evening only to enter our room and remove his things and move them into the guest room. I kept trying to get him to talk to me, but he said nothing to me, just looked at me coldly and then would ignore me again. It's been a roller coaster of the same thing over the last 3 months. It's so draining and frustrating, especially because he doesn't even travel for work anymore. He goes to work and comes back home. At first, I thought he would get over it and eventually move back to our bedroom, but Mark never did. I tried using sex as a means of getting Mark to stop ignoring me, but that didn't work either. The one time I stood naked in front of him, he just stared at my body like some rubbish work of art, and then focused again on his phone. I feel so ashamed of myself, and I didn't know what to do to get Mark to forgive me or even talk to me. I even slept with the door opened every night, hoping he would come to bed and touch me, but none of that had happened. The most scary part was the fact that he hadn't taken a single action since he found out. He wouldn't talk about it or let me apologize for it. He hadn't told anyone about it so far, and every day I keep expecting some call from my parents or his to accuse me or threaten me, but none have come. I really do not know what to do. I'm so scared because I don't know what to expect. He's being so quiet, and I know that's not good. He probably is planning something that would leave me totally ruined for life, and I'm so scared. I really desperately want Mark to forgive me, but I don't know how or what to do. I cannot think of anything else to do, which is why I'm begging you guys to help me. Help me figure out what to do to win Mark's heart again. Please, guys, I really love him, and I don't think I can go on with this silent treatment anymore. I'm rapidly losing my mind and peace, so please help me. Update. Hello, Reddits. It's me again. This is my second post on this app, and the first time I came here, I remember being so desperate to get some sort of help from here. I thought that maybe if I told some strangers who wouldn't be biased and would see just how regretful I am about the horrible things I did, that maybe I'll get the help I desperately seek and would finally be able to sort things out with Mark. I remember coming here feeling so hopeful, thinking that maybe, just maybe, someone out there would understand my plight and maybe not understand the reasons I did what I did, or the poor excuses I gave for the things I did, but would still try to help me, seeing how guilty I felt. I typed everything. How it all started, why it happened, when it did happen, and what I was thinking at every moment that it happened. I didn't miss out on a single thing, not even my emotions. I could have come here and lied about something or tried to blame Mark for everything I did. But I came here with a sincere heart that was willing to accept the judgment that would come with the help I would get. But you guys just showed me how delusional you thought I was. To you guys, I'm worse than a person who has murdered her husband. To you guys, I did everything selfishly and I was only greedy. To you guys, I deserve everything that's coming to me. And even though I know I do, it doesn't make it hurt any less. You guys have managed to reduce my emotions and my desperate desire for forgiveness into one word or many words, in fact, all starting and ending as the same thing. It's so horrible seeing those dark comments of yours that has not only left me reeling in shock at the extent of the hatred I got from you guys, but also even more depressed and hateful of myself, though. I cannot hate anybody else but myself, especially for this situation, because I know I could have done better. I know that I could have avoided all of these, and knowing that makes my head hurt even more. It's so sad how I have now ended up with nobody, not even one person on my side in this last month. It's so horrible having to feel this way, especially when there's not one person who cares enough to help me pass this dark path in my life. Mark had finally gotten out of his silence, and it had just been awful. He called for a family meeting at our place. He invited my parents and siblings and also his family too. He also invited my friends and his, as he had always considered them family. He used to casually joke and call them our extended family. So Mark had called everyone to be present that Saturday, and I knew nothing about it. He told me nothing, and apparently everyone assumed I already knew about the meeting, so no one bothered informing me about it. It was only when I saw everyone trooping in that day that I was shocked to see everyone. I was only able to calm my fast-beating heart after discovering that they didn't know, well, not yet. Mark stepped out of the guest room and then proceeded to inform everyone about everything. Everyone was shocked and said nothing for some seconds after Mark was done explaining. It was my mom who broke the silence and asked me in a cracked voice if everything Mark said was true. I couldn't exactly deny it, not with Mark staring at me coldly as if he was daring me to deny the truth. I only started crying, and everyone just looked at me in shock and disgust. My parents left almost immediately, but not before my father had told my siblings pointedly that he would disown any of them who spoke to me ever again. He didn't say anything to me directly, but I knew instinctively that his sentence clearly implied that he no longer considered me his child anymore. Mark's father left afterwards, but not without giving me the stink eye. His mom told me specifically that she didn't want to see me in her son's house anymore, and she gave me 30 minutes to move my things out. I tried reaching for Mark, but his mom had only pushed me off and into the bedroom to pack my things, helping me dump them into my suitcase, not caring whether they would tear. I just stood there watching her in tears. Mark stood in the same spot and watched me coldly, all look of warmth gone from his eyes. He didn't feel like the same man I have always known. He felt different, and knowing that I caused that makes my heart ache. Mark's mother, together with his sister, pushed me out of the house, and Mark had handed me the divorce papers before I was out of the door. I kept crying, and remembering now makes my tears fall even harder, even though a month has already passed. I cannot believe that I've lost Mark just like that, without even trying too much. I've lost him, and I've lost his love for me. I keep beating myself up for cheating on Mark with someone like Joe, who had, since the day Mark caught us in his gym, never called or asked after me. His gym doors remained locked after that day, and I only found out on that day while Mark talked that Mark had somehow gotten him implicated, and he had lost all his clients. He apparently had been sleeping with other men's spouses who came to his gym, and it wasn't just me alone. He just made me stupidly believe that I was the only one in his life since he never spoke about things like that. I cannot believe I let a perfect life fall through because of a coward like him. I regret everything so much, and I wish I could turn back the hands of time. Back to the day I registered at his gym, I would have run the other way. I should have appreciated what I had with Mark, and not made myself into someone needy like that. I should have spoken to him about how I felt, instead of miraculously waiting for him to guess my feelings about his travels. I should have suggested going with him, even though he would end up working all day and only come to me at night. But he would still be with me every day, instead of me staying back at home expecting full attention, despite knowing how busy he was. Have you ever had this feeling of emptiness on your inside, and yet that emptiness hurts so badly? It hurts so bad that sometimes you cannot even breathe properly. That's how I feel most times now with this whole situation. I feel like such a failure. I've failed at every life's game. I failed at being a wife, a friend, and even a daughter. I feel like even if life had more to offer, I would definitely fail in all of them. I had even failed at simple tasks like being a wife. I wish. There's probably nothing to wish for anymore, knowing that all my wishes will probably never come true. Not again. Not with everything I've done. Goodbye, guys. I hope you don't end up like me, regardless of what you think of me, or how much you hate me. Believe me, it's hell living like this.